Something really big happened in June that not many in the food industry have talked about. Um, this is the one story I forgot to mention to you before we started, but it's one that I think is incredibly important, and that is the fact that JBS um, went public on the United States Stock Exchange. Uh, JBS is a Brazilian meat giant. It is one of the biggest meat producers in the world, and the United States is the biggest market. It's based out of Brazil. I read a book earlier this year that I would highly recommend anyone who's interested in the food industry or whatnot. It's called Raw Deal by Chloe Sorvino. It goes into the kind of how the big meat industry has kind of been corrupted by politicians, by international organizations. It also she does a very good job going into how processed or artificial meat isn't necessarily the best answer moving forward, and I thought that part was interesting. But in this, she marks and she tracks the scandals of JBS, this giant meat packing company based out of Brazil, bribery charges, corruption charges, the owner slash sons of the owner escaping jail time. Giant company with which is very like full of scandals. And I had seen a TikTok, funny enough, from a farmer basically saying that he's really worried about this, and so I went and did some research. So this is from CNBC. So JBS debuted on the stock exchange earlier this month, and when they debuted, shares of the scandal-plagued Brazilian meat giant uh, uh, rose actually in its public debut. So basically, CNBC goes on to say that the opening trade of 13.65 per share values the company at roughly $30 billion, outstripping rival Tyson's food market cap of 19.82 billion. Just to give a perspective, their value is that much higher than Tyson's. And they end up with a slight gain. Last year, the company reported a net revenue of $77.2 billion and a net income of $2 billion, according to regulatory filings. They operate worldwide, but the biggest divisions are obviously Brazil, US, and Australia. They own more than 80% of Pilgrim's Pride, which is the US poultry giant. And this listing it's taken them 15 years to get to the stock market. They first announced plans in 2009, and then late in 2016, the company said it would have a US IPO. But months later, the Brazilian government began investigating corruption into the meatpacking company, including its top executives. So what happened? They recently in October they were fined. The Brazilian government fined JBS for buying cattle that were allegedly illegally raised in protected land in the Amazon, and they just have a whole history of corruption. Um, the reason why farmers here are worried about it is their ability to purchase, their ability to go ahead and like own and take over land. So they already control a huge share of the beef processing market. I think it's like every 1 in 5 chicken or cow that you eat from is from JBS. Just
Wow.
perspective. This idea of vertical integration, foreign influence on the supply chain, and the profit pressure of a now being a publicly traded company. There's worry that they're going to shortchange producers that they rely on in the U.S. They're going to buy up more land, putting independent ranchers out of business, and that we're eventually going to get to a large meat, maybe not monopoly, but close to it. And so there's just a lot of concern. Um, and then Bloomberg was sharing this as well. Um, they're eyeing more power around their U.S. grocery shelves, and they're saying that these shares could get the store, like their presence in grocery stores, could get even bigger. Uh, they've spent 2 decades just really like crushing rivals, going into different markets. And just to give you perspective, since 2006, the sales of their company of beef and meat and chicken have grown 40-fold. So it's just a giant deal. It's a huge impact into like where the meat industry is. And you may be wondering why this was allowed. They basically donated to the Trump campaign, and the thought is that is the reason why. Can't say for sure. That's all hearsay. It's all speculation. I say allegedly, very very strongly on this. But they finally got to IPO, and I think it's a terrible decision. I think it's one that is going to be very very destructive to independent cattle farmers in the United States. And yeah, Your
I
thoughts?
had no idea this company existed, and it
Oh
is
wow,
this
yeah,
funny, like, again, I mean, there are these like either umbrella companies or the people actually behind the scenes, or I even will sometimes when I'm researching a company to see how big are they, you cannot always get their revenue because they're either owned by or they're doing business as another entity. And so just hearing about this as an organization is crazy because, yeah, it is the largest meat processing enterprise in the world. But then even
hmm
when you were sharing some of those numbers, it's like you're making 2 billion off of 77.2 billion in revenue. That's less than 3% profit on this
yeah,
business. And, it's not to say that we need to shed a tear for JBS here, but I do think that there's this interesting thing that happens when any company basically gets publicly listed is that there's increased scrutiny. They have to go through more regulatory, hurdles sometimes. And, to your point, the example going the other way is it gives you the ability to, like either sell your own stock and now, make some briberies because now you have a little bit of additional money available because your stock price just went from, I think in March it was at $30, and then in April it spiked to like almost $50. And
yeah.
so what are some of the implications of that? And yeah, having not been a meat processor or a farmer, I think it's difficult maybe for me to weigh in on this, but I do think that it is, maybe we just need to keep an eye on this and just see how it like I question myself, like, how many times have I bought protein in some way, shape, or form, not knowing that it, has had this. You trace the trail back, and it
You
goes all
know,
the way to this
Justin,
company.
you no doubt have bought it. I've bought
Oh,
it.
I'm not
Every
even saying
listener
for
has
my
bought it.
personal consumption. I may be
hmm
saying for like a pop up that I've done. You know what I mean?
Oh
Like,
yeah,
I don't know. Like,
it's
have I have
crazy.
I have I inadvertently sold JBS products in some way, shape, or form? Because it is again this like buried behind layers of liability protection and
The
international
fact
trade and
the fact that they were allowed to be just publicly traded is what blows my mind. I mean, what they've done to acquire power in the meatpacking industry is insane. Just they were literally indicted on a bribery scheme that was worth like $150 million, and it
wow.
involved like thousands of officials across Brazil.
Yep.
It's an interesting time.